Hi, it's Atfa.
Good afternoon and welcome. You're listening live to Heart-to-Heart, a program which aims to help you understand and to become your loving self. This is KMET 1490 AM, ABC News Radio, live. I'm Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist. And I'm here with my wonderful friend, business partner, and colleague, Dr. Robert Jaffe.
Dr. Rashidian.
Yes,
Yes,
welcome.
thank you, and welcome to all our listeners.
Yes.
We are here at our 4 o'clock hour to discuss addictions, codependency, trauma, and relationships. And I want to start off by saying that we are all born into this world as our loving, authentic, true selves. Our loving, authentic, true selves come in with many fine qualities. We are all open to new experiences, open to learning, open to connecting. We are calm when we come in. They're actually learning now that you don't have to smack a baby's bottom when they come in. That's not a fine welcome to the world, but of course, you know, that's something that was done for a long time, still done, but not as often. We find that loving words and soft music and low lighting can be even more effective.
Yes.
We come in curious. We're like, oh my goodness, I was just somewhere and now I'm somewhere else. What's this all about? We come in emotionally available. That means that we can feel our feelings. All of our feelings are available to us at birth, including, we're discovering now, even our sexual feelings are available to us at birth or very, very early on. We also come in as honest people. We don't know how to lie. We don't know what lying is. That's something that we have to learn. But we want to be honest. When we're honest, we feel good about ourselves. We like ourselves the best. Mostly, we have a level of confidence when we come in. We're like, okay, here I am. Now what? You know, tell me what's on the agenda. Let's go for it. So we come in with the ability to be compassionate. We know how to connect emotionally with other people. We also come in, as I said before, we come in sexual. And for the most part, we come in trusting, like I'm going to trust that the world's going to be a nice place and take care of us, and people are going to care about us, and glad I'm here. These are all qualities that the majority of us, I don't know about everybody, but the majority of us come in with, and everybody has their own unique ways of feeling and appreciating these qualities, and some of these qualities are more profound in other people than in others. But for the most part, these are qualities that we come in with, and this is what we would call our authentic true selves. And if we are given fortunate enough to have parents or people who are parental substitutes in our life who are very kind, who are loving, who are very understanding, and their only agenda is to help us along our way, to find out who we are, what we really like, what we enjoy doing, and then how to get along in the world. If they have an honest agenda that way, then we are fortunate, and as we go along in our growing up years, we get a lot of what we need. We have an expression in therapy called the good enough parent.
Right.
And the good enough parent is the parent that gives the child enough of what he or she needs and lets the child know that they are unique and they are special and they are loved and they are wanted, and that their needs and their wants matter. Why do they matter? because they matter to those people. And so the mother and father then become icons of what it's like to be male and female in the world.
Exactly.
We generalize a lot of the world from our life experiences with the male and female partners that brought us into the world. So why am I talking about this? Because this program is about addictions and about codependency and about trauma. And so this is what happens when we come into a safe, communicative family. We come in and we feel safe. We feel like we can tell the truth. We're not punished for telling the truth. And for the most part, our parents don't have their own agenda as to who we should be and how we should be in the world.
Well, and that's where the problems may begin at that point. So our parents may want us to be what they believe is best for us.
Right.
Now, some parents are healthy enough to also allow the children to kind of go through the motions and to be expressive and to experiment and come up with what they like, and then to put those together and then come up with this much better and healthier plan of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can call it that way. But then again, we see that they are parents that they force their ideas on their children, and it's like that's all what they say is the rule, and it has to happen.
Right.
And so such a rigid policies, rigid rules, rigid expectations, rigid boundaries.
Right. And the more rigid the parents are, and the more controlling the parents are, the less freedom the child experiences, and the less the child feels that what they want and what they need matters.
Right.
And of course, if you grow up feeling as though what you need and what you want doesn't matter, then you fall into a dysfunctional pattern of thinking, a dysfunctional pattern of feelings, and dysfunctional pattern of behavior. And some of that can turn into addictions, right? And what addictions do is addictions give us a sense of relief from the stress of feeling as though we don't matter, and our feelings and thoughts and wants don't matter. Sometimes we feel as though we're not good enough. When we think we're not good enough, then we want relief from that, because it's a painful thing to walk around believing that you're not good enough and that other people know better than you about life and also about what's good for you.
Well, sometimes there are other people that they know more than we are. We do. They actually know better than what we know, right? And that's okay. I mean, we can learn from them. There's nothing wrong with when people know better than we do. I mean, you and I are experienced, people, both personally and professionally, but we can't say that we know it all.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to clarify that.
Yeah.
So what other people can offer us is their own knowledge and their own experience, but their knowledge and their experience may or may not be what's right for us.
Right. Exactly. Right? Yeah.
So even though they know a lot more, let's say they have a child, and the child wants to be an actor or an actress, and they know from their life experience that a lot of people who are actors and actresses have problems. They have a lot of problems in relationships. They have problems with addictions. They have problems with rejection, because they have to go through a long process sometimes, getting rejected over and over again. And so the parent has from their experience the knowledge that being an actor or an actress is not a good thing to get into.
Right.
Yeah. And so the parent has to then be aware that the child's desire to do that, even if the child has that desire, of course, needs to be the overrunning decision maker. That even if the child, and that doesn't mean that the parent can say, well, here are the obstacles, here are the things that I've learned and that I read about and that I see, and make the child more knowledgeable. But telling the child that that they can't do that, or that they're not going to support them in that, or that they think that they should do something else. Why don't you go into business? Why don't you become an attorney? Why don't you become a doctor? That's what I mean when I say that the parent knows better than the child.
Right.
Because
exactly.
the child has to figure out for themselves what they really want, and then the parent can tell the child, here's some of the things you may encounter, or here's what I've learned. But if you really want it, I'm behind you.
Exactly.
That's what I mean by it.
That's the healthy approach.
Yes. So what we want to do then is we want to give our children the freedom to be themselves and to say their truth without fear of repercussion. Now, we call people who got parented by good enough parents authentic, the authentic self, the authentic true self. And we call people who got parented by parents who were not good enough, who were too controlling, or let the child do whatever they wanted without supervision, which is too much freedom at too early an age, right? The parent has to be aware of what stage the child is in and how much freedom the child can take, while, you know, and of course, if the parent fails either in over-controlling or not being caring enough or not watching the child closely enough and understanding where the child is, then we call that child perhaps inauthentic, which then leads to codependency and addictions. Codependency comes from not feeling as though you know the answers for yourself, so you're always looking to someone else to give you the right way to go.
So basically, you're not your authentic true self. You operate primarily based on your false selfhood, and false selfhood is the characteristics of what parents are telling you how to be.
Exactly. Parents tell you who to be and how to be in the world.
Right.
And if you're not what your parents want, then you risk your parents' rejections,
and then so that fear of rejection, you know, also creates lots of fear and shame, lots of shame and guilt, if you know you want to do something else that it doesn't have, you know, parental approval.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Which is, you know, the fundamental aspect of codependency.
Correct.
Become people pleaser, you know, controlling, etc.
Right. And so we just got notified that we're going to have to take a little break here, which we will. But when we come back, we're going to talk much more about the authentic true self, the codependent inauthentic self, and some of the characteristics, and also how can you begin to heal if you believe that you haven't experienced the nurturing and the love and the connection that you want. Exactly. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart-to-Heart program at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here. And for those of you who just tuning in, our discussion for this program is about codependency, addictions, trauma, and impact of them in relationships. And we would like to hear from you. Please call us at 951-922-3532. Dr. Jaffe, you were talking about the interesting topic of Codependency.
Codependency, the authentic true self, and the false self. And then in the first segment, we talked about newborn babies and what newborn babies require, the qualities of care that they require, and that if they get parented by the what we call in psychology the good enough parent, then they turn out to be people who feel pretty good about themselves. Their self-esteem is pretty high, and that means that they feel happy to be who they are. They have, and they feel good enough because they got their needs met well enough.
Right.
And so, if on the other hand we weren't fortunate enough to be raised by those people, we had parents who probably didn't have their own good enough parents, and they hadn't learned by the time that we came into the world how to be different than their parents. Or sometimes people who have not good enough parents overreact and do the opposite, which the opposite is usually not the greatest either. For example, if our parents had parents who were very controlling, we may decide not to control at all. And so then we don't set limits on our children, and our children get too much freedom too soon, and that doesn't make them feel good. It doesn't make them feel safe and cared for, because they have all this freedom, and they know that they're just little and they don't really understand what's dangerous and what isn't dangerous, and it gives them a sense of not being cared for.
Exactly. Yes, and that's the feeling that if it is not recognized and the child grows up with that feeling, ultimately, it's going to impact, their choices in life, the quality of life, and their relationships, and pretty much everything that's involved in a child's life as an adult.
Right. So there are many qualities that go along with being your authentic true self, and an equal number that go along with becoming a codependent false self. As I'm going to comment on a few of these qualities, and we can discuss them today. And if you recognize any of these within yourself, you can congratulate yourself if it's a positive thing and you like it, and it's part of your authentic true self. You can say, "Good job, Mary," or "Good job, Joe," or I'm glad I got that, and I got that, and sometimes maybe I learned it from my parents, or maybe I didn't learn it from my parents, but I've learned it since. And so that it doesn't really matter as long as you've learned it.
Exactly. And if you have it, let us know how you got it, because it will help so many other people who are listening to this program, and they would like to know how you got it so that they can practice it.
Right. So what are some of these true self qualities and these false self qualities? One of them, a true self quality, is the quality of being emotionally vulnerable. Okay, why is that a good quality? What do you think?
Well, when you're emotionally vulnerable, you are, able to talk about what's going on with yourself, right? And unless you talk about what's going on with yourself, nobody can understand that. Nobody can get you, right? And then also when you're emotionally vulnerable with yourself, it talks about your sense of, trust that you have with other people, sense of trust that you have with yourself, that you are able, to feel safe enough to talk about what's going on with you, right? It's very important, because many people, they keep all that unhappiness, they keep all that negative emotions within themselves, and they don't share it with anybody, believing that who cares?
Exactly. Well,
right?
Either that, or believing that if you share, you're going to be judged.
You're going to be judged, and then also nothing's going to change for me anyway. These are some of frequent ones that we hear from our clients. And the other thing is that if you become emotionally vulnerable, that means you are a weak person and you're not a strong person.
Yeah, that's a misperception that people have.
Yes.
Yeah.
So There is so many, beside this, there are other factors that people may experience or have experienced, and therefore they try to keep their emotions to themselves and play it tough.
And that's the flip side of being vulnerable from the standpoint of the authentic true self. The inauthentic false or codependent self pretends to be strong.
Pretends to be strong. That means masking what's going on underneath.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting because people who pretend to be strong are usually idealized by other people who also pretend to be strong, and see the person who's pretending to be strong as strong, rather than, oh, this person is pretending to be strong, and underneath they're very vulnerable, but they're not brave enough to say it.
Exactly. One of the phrases that I hear about those people who are supposedly or perceived as being strong is that, oh, they have such an aggressive, personality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at the word aggressive in dictionary, it is far from being, healthy attitude to have. Right. But people, they gladly, would like to receive that title as aggressive people. Even when people are hiring, they put a job ad out there and they say they're looking for an aggressive, office manager, for example, right? So aggressive means, to have the tendency of becoming a violent person. Right. So why would that be, a characteristic that one wants to have for himself or for herself?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another characteristic that we can discuss, which is with the true self and the false self, that the true self is not aggressive, and the true self is also not passive. What the true self is assertive. Right?
Yes.
What's the difference between being assertive or being aggressive or passive? Assertive means that you say your truth without having a chip on your shoulder. Right? So, I really like chocolate ice cream when everybody around me is eating vanilla. Right? That's aggressive. Or no, excuse me, that's assertive. That's assertive.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't believe that this war is a correct war, when everybody around them is saying, no, we need to fight them. Right? That's assertive. Now, being assertive doesn't mean that you're right, it doesn't mean that you're wrong, but it means that you feel like your thoughts and feelings matter enough to say them clearly without that chip on your shoulder. What is the chip on your shoulder? The chip on your shoulder is when someone says to you, you like chocolate? You like chocolate?
Yeah.
Vanilla is really much better.
Right.
That's the chip. The chip is when you're trying to sell your idea or your feeling or your thought to somebody, and if the other person disagrees, you don't see it as a disagreement. You see it as an affront to you. Right. So the true self is able to be assertive. The false self is either aggressive or passive. Passive means I'm not going to say anything. I'll just go along for the ride, or I'm going to make sure that the other person knows that they're wrong, and I'm going to aggress them out of being wrong.
Exactly.
That aggression can be verbal, and it can also be turned into physical.
Which in some cases we have seen that happening.
Yes.
Right.
So another characteristic, okay, and this is something that I don't think people understand, but I'm going to say it because I believe it's accurate, is that a person who's assertive enjoys being nurtured.
Yes.
A person who has their true self available enjoys being nurtured. The person who has their false self, lives in their false self, does not want to be nurtured. They want to be admired. They want to be agreed with. Sometimes they want somebody to kiss their butt.
They want to be put on the pedestal.
Put on the pedestal, right. That's the false self. So when you try to nurture somebody, what you're doing is you're trying to let them know that they matter, and they matter to you, and that you're important to them, and that you're a valuable person, and that you have good qualities, and that you appreciate them. That's nurturing somebody. When you're avoiding being nurtured, what you do is you say, "Don't give me any of that kiss ass stuff. I don't want to hear it."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Give me the facts. Just give me the facts.
Right.
So these are a few of the things. There's a whole bunch more. I'll give one more, and that is, and I'm going to give this because I'm a therapist, and so this is very important to me in my work. A person who is in their true self is open to their own unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
That means that they know that there's things going on inside of them that they're not aware of.
Right.
And that means that they're not perfect. That means that there's forces inside of them, which we could call the subconscious and the unconscious, that are at work on them, and sometimes they will do things as a result of that are different from what they consciously intend. Okay, so, and if you're open to the unconscious, that's different than the person who is codependent or living in their false self, where they block unconscious material.
And we know that the unconscious runs the show.
The unconscious runs the show. We know that as therapists. We're also in the process of writing a book about it.
Right.
Yeah. But so people who have enough of their authentic true self are usually the people who are more interested in getting psychological help, because they recognize that there's things going on inside of them that they don't have any control over, and they want to understand those things so that they can get better control over their lives, and they can be better people. People who are living in their codependent or false self are so hidden and believe so much that they have to be perfect, that they won't visit a therapist, or if they do go in, they won't come back, because they're too busy protecting themselves from believing that there's anything wrong with them. They don't want to appear to anyone else, and they also don't want to recognize within themselves that there are forces at work inside of them that are not helping them, that are actually hindering them.
You know, you said a magical word, which is protecting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do have couples who come in, and they all the time they just point at each other that it's his fault, it's her fault, and the reason is da 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 da.
Yes.
So all they say, all they verbalize is how they are innocent, and their source of suffering is the other partner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they try to protect themselves, and they rather be so right in their, analogy, in their, supporting, information, instead of looking at themselves to see, wait a minute, how am I contributing to my partner to be that way, to
Yes.
maintain that behavior?
Yes.
So they rather be, and this is your famous phrase, they rather be right than being connected.
Correct.
Right. So they
Correct.
start protecting themselves,
Mm-hmm.
Instead of looking at the dynamic, and then they are part of that dynamic. They
Right.
are 50% of that dynamic that is not going well for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
So this is a huge part that codependency is definitely shows itself within that dynamic, that unhealthy dynamic.
Absolutely.
And then the finger pointing at each other, which is, the very, very much problematic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so another thing that is very, very important, that people really don't know about and don't talk about, in religion, in many religions, they say basically that we are all one. Right? God is oneness, and we are parts of God, and we are all one. That means that we're not separate. What we have learned now, in not just in spirituality, but what we've learned scientifically, is that that is actually the case.
Right.
How have we learned that? We've learned that because what we do is we now have uh, uh, mechanisms for looking into the nature of how reality is constructed. So we have microscopes, we have an electron microscope, we have particle accelerators, and with each of these instruments, we can look more deeply into how things are constructed. And when we look into molecules, we look into atoms, and we look into subatomic particles, what we find is that all matter is actually energy, and the subatomic particles are blinking in and out of existence millions of times per second to give the illusion that it's solid. Just like in a movie theater, there's a reel, and the reel is showing all these different images. And when you run the reel at a more quick rate, it looks like looks like there's something moving on the screen.
Right.
It's actually not. There's nothing moving. Actually, it's just these images that are blinking in and out of existence.
Right.
That's the nature of reality. And so what we are is we're these energy waves that have learned how to coalesce and appear solid. And so what does that mean in terms of our ability to be authentic and to be real, which is we're all the real person is aware that we are all built of the same material, and we all have much more connection and are much more in common than we have not in common, because
Exactly.
we are made of the same
Right.
wavelengths.
Exactly. And that sameness, is really significant to understand, which has, its own concepts of how it plays out in our relationships.
Exactly.
Right. So we just got our notice for commercial break. We will continue with this fascinating topic after our commercial break. So please join us.
See you soon.
Welcome back from our commercial break. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here at Heart-to-Heart program at KMET 1490 AM, ABC News Radio. We're talking about codependency, addictions, trauma, and relationships. We would like to hear from you, so please call us 951-922-3532. Your experience, your story, your comments are essential. Many people can learn from you just by listening to you. So your contribution is valued and appreciated.
Absolutely.
Dr. Robert Jaffe.
Yes, ma'am. So we've been talking a lot about the true self and the false self. The false self, also known as the codependent self. How does this happen? At the beginning of the show, we talked about nurturing parents and the good enough parent. The good enough parent is the one who takes good enough care of the child so that the child feels a strong sense of belonging, a strong sense that they matter, a strong sense that they are cared for, and the world then takes on that shape to them. The way that we are impacted by our upbringing often determines our worldview. So the same two people, one who got the upbringing, the nurturing upbringing, and one who didn't, can walk through New York and they have a whole different view of New York, right? They're going to say, one person say it's dirty, nobody cares about anybody else. Everybody is very self-centered. They don't make eye contact. This and this. And the other person can say it was a great place. I felt like everybody cared. If I wanted to talk to somebody, they'd stop and give me the time of day. We'd talk. They'd have a whole different experience, and that's because their worldview is different. And so, number one, they're viewing it differently, but also they're vibrating at a different frequency.
Yes, you're from New York.
I'm from New York, but I'm not a New Yorker. Well,
yeah.
I came out here when I was 5, and so I'm still more an LA guy. But I like New York. I like it. I often wonder what it would have been like, if I had been raised there, because a lot of my relatives are there. But basically, what I just said was um, our worldview is different, depending upon whether we're nurtured or not nurtured. But also, very importantly, is that our vibration is different. What does that mean? Well, before the break, I was talking about how we are all energy,
Right.
right? And that if you look at things through the lens of an optical microscope, or you look at things through the lens of an electron microscope, or a particle accelerator. Particle accelerators can look into the nucleus of an atom. And looking into the nucleus of an atom, what we see is nothing solid. What we see is subatomic particles blinking in and out of existence.
Right.
And so what does that mean? It means that this is kind of all a light show that we're here, but really what we are is this energy. And because we are human and we all have spirits, we vibrate at the frequency of love, or we vibrate at the frequency of fear, and we vibrate back and forth between love and fear, and then all the other emotions also have their own vibration. So if you're vibrating at a frequency of shame, if you're vibrating at a frequency of guilt, if you're vibrating at a frequency of anger,
or all of them combined,
or well, all yeah. But what I'm saying is each of those carries their own vibratory frequency, and as human beings, we have all of them, but we tend to settle in on one more than the other. Right. And the one we settle in is closer to love or closer to fear. The ones that are closer to fear are the lower vibrations, and those are the ones where the person is drawing into. We attract through our vibrations. So those are the ones that when we're vibrating at lower frequencies, we draw in other people who are also vibrating at those frequencies, the same at higher and higher frequencies.
Exactly.
Yes. And what I'm talking about is both scientific and spiritual. So the more that
that's very interesting. People think that science is separated from the spirituality and vice versa.
And it used to be because we didn't have particle accelerators.
Right.
We didn't, we've had optical microscopes for about 500 years, but we just recently, within the last 100 years, developed electron microscopes. And then there's other tools that we have that we can look into the reality of things.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. And so science is now actually bearing out a lot of what spirituality has been telling us for many, many centuries. But what has this got to do with how you can heal from coming from a less than ideal background? Everything begins with intention. So if your intention is to learn how to be more loving, that's different than if your intention is to learn how to collect more money.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if your intention is to be more magnanimous and more generous, that's different than if your intention is to get as much as you can from people. Right. So free will is what we have. And no matter how good we are in psychology, we have not learned, nor do I imagine we will learn, how to change a person's free will. I think that's something that we're born with, and I believe that that we all have to make our decisions based on what we value the most. If we value love, kindness, connection with others, the ability to be compassionate, all the things that make us look up to the icons that we look up to in the world, the Jesuses, the Mohammeds, the Allahs, all of these people who we look up to and we hold as icons. These were the people who held those values. And if we want to hold those values, then we have to say, that's where I want to head, and nothing's going to stop me from moving in that direction.
Right.
That's the beginning of healing, is when you desire to be better than you are.
And this desire needs to be authentic as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We can have desires for many things, but not truly be authentic towards them. Right? So desires is healthy when it becomes, part of, growing up, part of self-growth, part of understanding yourself.
Right. And so being in the authentic true self means that you are able to aspire to or to love unconditionally, right? When you're in your false or codependent self, you can still love, but it's with conditions. And that's why you hear so many people who were born gay talk about how their parents disowned them. Right? Because their parents were stuck in, they couldn't love unconditionally. Yes. And then what does it do to a person when they're only loved conditionally?
Yes, I mean, I hear this from children that they say, even today as adults, they say growing up, their parents told them, unless they maintain good grades, they are not loved by them.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't finish up their plate of food, mommy wouldn't love them, or daddy wouldn't love them.
Right.
Or if they wouldn't have done certain things, their chores or things like that, then they wouldn't get the bicycle, or they couldn't go to the movie with their friends.
Exactly.
So those are exactly the conditions that we are talking about.
Yes.
They seem to be good ones at the moment for disciplining the child, but essentially, we are telling them that they are loved conditionally.
And what effect do you see that having on that particular person?
Well, the fact is, that they're not being seen for who they are.
And how does that affect them later?
Well, if they don't know who they are, they will never have a chance to, or, childhood is the time where we learn how to be ourselves or not, right? And if we try to be something that our parents are going to enjoy, and we do just that, we're never going to have a chance to be our own authentic true self.
And then what?
And then then we grow up as our false self, and the cycle continues.
Yes. And so the false self is not a happy person.
No.
So their unhappiness then weighs on them.
Right.
Some people who have grown up as their false selves don't know that they can be happy. So what do they do if they believe they can't be happy? They substitute getting high for being happy.
Right.
Getting high can be through drugs, of course.
Right. Yeah, addictions.
Alcohol, of course. It can also be through what we call process addictions, such as gambling, betting the horses, gambling. You get a high from that, right? But also getting high can also be based on codependency. So the husband who comes home to the wife and says, "Look, honey, I bought you a new Lexus." And she looks at him and is like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." And she hugs and kisses him. That can be a high, right? Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with gift giving, but that can be an example of giving something in order to get loved. Right. And then of course, the more that happens, the more we believe that we are only loved for our behavior and not for ourselves.
Exactly, because we're not used to that, right? If you're not seen for who we are, if you don't get that sense of that, we matter, that who we are is valuable, and there's nothing wrong with us that needs to be changed, then we look for approval, we look for the sense of good enough, we look for all of that externally.
Right.
Because we learn that external factors are the concept that makes me who I am, not who I am internally.
Exactly. So we all have an ego. The ego's job is to make sure that we are physically safe.
Right.
As long as we are in bodies, and those bodies can be hurt or killed, we will have an ego. So it doesn't look like anytime soon we will get rid of the ego. Therefore, it doesn't make sense for us to be at war with our ego, as some people have advocated, that the ego is the enemy. I don't see the ego as the enemy. I see the ego as a servant. And the ego means that I exist as a body in this time and place. I have a body, I have a mind, I have a personality, and I can enjoy the benefits that that body gives me, and that mind gives me, and that personality gives me. So that's my ego. Now, the ego is not there alone in the human being. The other side of the human being, the human is the ego. The being is the other part of us, which is the spirit, or the soul, or as we were talking about earlier, the heart.
Right.
Our heart, the part of us that can love unconditionally, the part of us that's capable of self-sacrifice, the part of us that can give with no expectation of receiving. That part of us, that's our spirit. And since we are human, we have both. What we have also in psychology, we call ego defenses.
Right.
That means if someone isn't being nice to us, our ego speaks up and says, "What do you mean?" And then wants to fight or run away. Those ego defenses can be valuable, but in modern society, often they are problematic because we don't need them, but the ego says we do. The ego says, if I smile at this person and the person doesn't smile back at me, I'm being threatened. And that isn't accurate. But the ego believes it is. So the ego then starts to go, well, if this person doesn't smile at me, and they start to make up a story about the person. That SOB, who does he think she is?
Right.
Who does she think she
Right.
is?
Right.
And they make up a story to justify the fact that their ego was wounded.
Right.
So
Exactly.
what we need is we need to have an ego that is a servant rather than a master.
Right.
That in and of itself is not just another radio program. That's a whole course. How do we get an ego that's a servant rather than a master? And yet, I think that's the task for us now in terms of our evolution, to be able to turn our egos into servants rather than masters. But one of the biggest problems now is, of course, we have the internet, and all of the platforms that you can get on, where people are trying to compete with each other as far as how great they're doing.
And that's become such a profound place of competition. And then I hear that people, they don't know what information to trust, because every one of them promises that their program is the best.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We see that in different areas of life, different areas that people need it. In particular, in terms of beauty, in terms of diet, in terms of establishing businesses, in terms of so many things, right?
Yes.
So my program is better than everybody else. That's your one-stop place. Things like that.
Right. Right.
And there are also, the problem with this website is that they are there one day, and the next day they're not.
Yep.
So we don't know how to trust them. But I think the program about ego is something that definitely we can start using. Yeah.
In the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, they have a saying, and the saying is, self will run riot.
Right.
Self will run riot means that our ego is taken over.
Exactly.
And that anyone that gets in the way is going to be run over.
Right.
Yeah.
We got our signal that our program is about to end. We want to thank you for listening to our program, and we would like to invite you to please join us next week, Thursday at 3 p.m. for first hour of human sexuality and the second hour of codependency, trauma, addictions, and relationships. And thank you for being a part of our lives. And don't forget that all you need is love.
All you need is love. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The proceeding